focus in my essay is on John Adams. The title is Passionate President and a Loyal Friend. It was the mid-1700s in a newly colonized territory that was soon to be a war-torn environment as they fought for freedom to be a new country. This resolutely educated, passionate statesman, outspoken vice president, courageous president, and loyal friend stood fiercely for America. His father, John Adams Sr., was a direct descendant of Henry Adams, also known as his grandfather, who immigrated from England in 1638 as a Puritan colonist to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. John Adams' father was a farmer, congressionalist, deacon, and town councilman, so obviously he was born on a farm on October 30th, 1735 in a town called Braintree, better known as Quincy, Massachusetts. Back then, you might think that Massachusetts was a state, but you'd be mistaken, as Massachusetts was an English colony. He was the eldest of 3 boys, and his father taught him to read at age 6. His mother, Susanna Boylston Adams, a descendant of prominent Brookline family from colonial Massachusetts. People say he was like his mother in many ways. For instance, he is a chatterbox and has a hot temper. At age 15, he passed the college entrance exam and received a scholarship to attend Hartford College, which was started by a Puritan minister, as he was only 16 when he left for college. After graduating from Harvard, he moved to Worcester, Massachusetts at age 19 to become a minister and then a teacher. Then he realized that ministering and teaching was not his cup of tea. He studied law under John Putnam, a prominent and astute attorney, and graduated from Harvard Law School in 1758 with a master's degree in 3rd in his class. At 23 years of age, he met Abigail Smith, who was favored over other suitors because he was well-read, outspoken, and astonishingly interesting. Plus, it didn't hurt that her father, Reverend Smith, approved of him as well and gave him permission to court Abigail since he was a third cousin. John married Abigail just before his 29th birthday in the fall of 1764, and they had 6 children: Abigail, John Quincy, Susanna, Charles, Tom Boylston, and Elizabeth. Abigail ran the family home and farm as he found himself often away from home during his political responsibilities, as they wrote many letters during this time apart. John's most faithful and loyal advisor was his wife, Abigail Adams, because she was well-read, objective, and had an astute mind. He believed that everyone deserved a fair trial, so John decided to defend the Redcoats of Boston Massacre, where 6 of 8 were acquitted. Due to defending the Redcoats, his practice suffered, and yet later this enhanced his reputation as a courageous, generous, and impartial lawyer. In 1774, he was elected to the Massachusetts Assembly in the First Continental Congress, at which time he nominated George Washington of Virginia to be the commander-in-chief during the Revolutionary War. Congress asked John Adams, and he requested Thomas Jefferson since John admired Thomas' exquisite writing that represented the freedoms of our country. In 1776, the Continental Congress published the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia, announcing the colonists' intent to form a new nation. In 1779, John and his two eldest sons were separated from their family to go to France to negotiate the peace treaty for the Revolutionary War, which began their longest separation until summer of 1784, when the family joined them. During that time, he was asked to write the Massachusetts Constitution, which was accepted by several other states as the Revolutionary War came to a close in 1781. Then in summer of 1785, they moved to London, England, because he was asked to represent his country as the first U.S. minister to England. While in England, Abigail needed aid service to assist her in order to entertain the many political officials who came to dinner. Finally, they returned to America. They chose to live in New York City as John was placed on the ballot to run for president, but lost to George Washington. In 1789 in New York, George Washington was granted the full powers and responsibilities of the presidency by the U.S. Constitution, and John Adams became our first vice president and president over the Senate. George Washington retired from the presidency in 1796, which opened the opportunity for another election. John was elected to represent the Federalist Party, and Thomas Jefferson was elected to represent Democrats and the Republican Party. John was elected president by a very narrow margin over Thomas Jefferson. Therefore, Mr. Jefferson was vice president shortly after the election. There were difficulties with Congress and Thomas Jefferson because of the French and British War. They had a different agenda than President Adams. Astonishingly, John refused to declare war on France. The capital was located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, while the slaves built the permanent White House in Washington, D.C. John and Abigail were the first to live in the White House in 1800. John and Abigail weren't pleased with the use of slaves to build the White House. Abigail needed needed 30 servants to care for the house and all the entertaining that they did with dignitaries. Because of President Adams' views on the French War and Thomas Jefferson's slandering him by bribing reporters to print lies, he became most unpopular and lost his second term. In 1801, John and Abigail retired to their Quincy, Massachusetts family farm without saying goodbye to Thomas Jefferson. Later, Abigail secretly wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson to reconcile the feud between them. Shortly after that, in October 1818, Abigail died, and John wrote his friend Thomas about missing Abigail. John's dying last words were, "My friend Thomas is still alive." Then he passed away and didn't know that Thomas had died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, the 50th birthday of the United States of America. John Adams was the first president to live in the White House, the first vice president, the first minister of the USA to England, and the first to nominate George Washington as commander-in-chief. John Adams was a well-read, passionate statesman, vice president, courageous president, and loyal friend. Most significantly known as one of our generous founding fathers, because he valiantly gallantly stood for America to be free from British tyranny and created our standards to govern our country by delegating the penning of our Declaration of Independence and writing our Constitution that over 239 years later is still revered.